Bits and bobs, niggles and farts. Not looking for votes for sympathy, but I have basically been recovering from shingles, so we are about a good weekend and a half kind of away and behind. And this needs to get to paint. So, we've got a lot to do. So on this episode of Piggy Power, we're going to try and tidy up some of the bracketry that has yet to be done. All the I'll do that later brackets. So there's 3 main brackets in mind, and 1 to reinforce. We need to reinforce this bracket, which has too much lateral movement. We need to make a bracket for this post here, which I'm hoping will sit about here and just poke out like nicely there, so you can just take the cap off if you need to get to it. There needs to be a bracket to hold this engine loom, because, you know, not ideal. And down there somewhere is the matrix valve, which opens on a wire, which you pull and close for heat. So what we'll do, I think, is those brackets there don't get affected by the inlet or even the brake, or even this, in fact. So we'll move that out of the way. We can unbolt that, move that out of the way. We can wire in the fan while we're at it, and then we can get access down there and in there and know what we're doing with the brackets. Disconnect the battery first, I think, because that's just asking for trouble. I now can't find the cover that I made for that, or modified for that. So we'll be using Pixabox aided design this morning and making up some brackets and reinforcements for bits. Yeah, that's what we're doing. So let's get on with it, shall we? So a positive post is going to sit something like that. Clears everything, keeps it out of the way, and if the cover comes off the back, there's nothing really you can get to that. There's nothing behind there, so that's fine. The front bolt here actually doesn't connect to the rear. They're separate, independent, which is quite nice. So we're going to use that as our mounting point. I'm not quite sure how they originally mounted, but that's what we're going to use. So what we've come up with is obviously we need a sort of an L bracket supported that bolts down to the, we're going to weld it onto the bulkhead. Yeah, that won't get in the way, be fine. And this is the design we've come up with. So this is sort of, when we jump to the finished product, this is actually our Mark 1. We measured the distance off the bulkhead to the hole and then just above. We measured the amount we want welded on the bulkhead with 3 points measured to drill holes for plug welding, spot welding. And then these flanges at the right angle, hopefully, to sit off, which is not 90 degrees off the bulkhead, it's just slightly up. And then what we'll do is we'll cut this out, and those will come down to here, folded in, a little flange either side at the top to keep the strength at the top. And that's the design, that's the plan. So let's we'll cut this out now, fold it into shape, maybe use a bit of tape, see what it looks like on the car, and go from there. So that's the shape we've come up with, folded into shape, how I want the bracket to kind of look, hopefully. And then on the bulkhead, I can't really show with one hand, but basically that's going to sit in there like that and hold it at just the right angle, hopefully. So the next stage now is to then put this on some 1mm plate and fold that into shape. We'll put a hole at the top, bolt that onto there, and a final check, and then clean up the bulkhead and weld it on. But what we're doing this morning, it's really early, as you can tell with the cockerel. So we're going to go ahead and use more cardboard aided design, or Pixabox aided design, and design the other brackets that we want, and then we can do all the cutting out and the welding all in one go. They don't affect each other in this case, so we'll do that. Here's our second, slightly more difficultly worked out bracket that will sit down in there. And this obviously little seat flange is where this will sit on top, so we'll that piece there. So we'll put a hole through it and weld a nut behind it, a couple of speed holes which you can probably just see in there, and then a little cutout at the bottom here. We'll make a little cutout there, because obviously if there's water is sitting in the bottom there, that's going to rust in through all day. And then a few holes at the bottom to weld it into the bulkhead. I've made it wide enough, 1 to get that bracket, and 2 to get my welder nozzle in there. So I can get it down there, and I can weld that sucker in. Awesome. So this is a slightly, well, this took ages to kind of try and work out the shapes. You can't really measure a bend, or I can't anyway. So I just cut pieces of cardboard until I found the shapes I wanted. That's basically going to bolt in there with 2 M8s, 1 at the top and 1 down at the bottom, so it's removable. And we can use it to hold the wiring that goes across the ECU, kind of as drawn there. And also we'll use it and we'll put a bit of plate there that hopefully, wherever it is, where's my cable gone? There it is. That this will slide onto, and then maybe we'll put a nice cable tie over it or a little bracket over it as well. This will have a little flange edge to it to give it some strength, because obviously even in 1mm steel or 2mm steel it's going to be a bit floppy, because there's quite a, you know, a bridged gap over there. But it's only holding wiring, it's not like holding something very heavy or strong or weighty, so it should do the job nicely, that, and it'll bolt in quite sweet. So our next step really is to draw these up on some steel, cut them out and start shaping them. Well, that's what a morning's work looks like, people. There's our 3 brackets, not welded up yet. We're going to do some final position, a couple of tacks just before we as soon as you welded these, they are fixed in position and rotation and all the rest of it. So many angles to consider. 2 tabs which will basically be welded on top of each other. Have I worked out how to do that? No, not really. But I'm hoping I can get welds through there. Now weld on there, somewhere on there, and that'll hold the bracket that we want. We beat round each side of that. I don't know if you can see that clearly enough. Gives it a beveled edge, and most importantly, well, it looks okay, it looks nice. Less things to rub on when they're on a beveled edge, but also it, really does make a difference on the strength. It's basically like a gusset all the way around both sides. So next job is to weld these up, and then we're going to get this in position. We're going to weld an M6 nut on the back of that. We're going to bolt it to the actual piece on the car, and then adjust this, just tweak it to the final adjustment before we put some welds on. Weld that up, put it in the car, and then we can weld the 5 tacks in onto the car. Same with this really, we'll just tack that in, see if it fits okay before we weld it into the car. So that's the next job, weld those up in their positions, linish them, and then they'll be welded onto the bulkheads. Well, that one won't, but that'll have holes then drilled for the bolts. I guess we better update you. A couple of hours work, we had lunch, came out with some energy and cracked on. So those brackets you saw earlier are temporarily in, some of them sort of permanently in. The bracket down the bottom, which is really well hidden, is down there holding our basically heater valve on, the original mini one. I need to put a hole for the bulkhead. We'll finish that with the engine out. I just can't get down there, as you can probably tell, even with the new bracket above it out of the way. Might need to put a little plate behind it, might just weld it on, but I've only welded it on one spot at the moment. Top plate here, this curved section, she's in. M8 bolt at the top, M8 bolt at the bottom. Train. I have welded in a nut behind this plate and welded a nut down here on this plate, so it's just a case of putting 2 bolts in. This is our fancy little clip, which took some time to design. There's actually another piece of metal underneath this to help guide it in and hold it in the right place. This is just a loom guide, so that loom will go across there, and that we can put a cable tie around it once the loom's wrapped. So that's nice, just tying that in. This doesn't rub on stuff here. And just to demonstrate, this is how this clicks on. There we go. And she's clicked on. And that's holding nice and steady, and that'll plug into there. So that's a lot of work for what seems to be simple, but it makes it nice and tidy. We need to do something with our fuel line. I have a feeling I'm going to go straight down there rather than massive S-bends. Our main positive terminal's on. The main terminal wires go behind. They're not actually connected to this, which is why that's welded on. So that's good. It's not in the way, comes out easily. And then we just, while we're at it, got the welder out, we'll just put a little bit of bracing on the back here, because this coolant bottle was all wobbly, and now she's pretty darn good. So I think that deserves a cup of tea, boys and girls. So I want to get a brew on, that's for sure. Have a cup of tea. And then I'd like to look at the bonnet stay, so that means putting the bonnet on, just temporarily. See what that looks like, and see if we can put a bonnet stay on. And then the shroud for this, and then tidying up this front end, and then maybe adding a little bit of metalwork here to help the airflow get to the air filter, and then an aluminium kind of cover around the back of it, so obviously all the water and the muck don't go on it. So we're going to try and just work on this front end. The clutch is still to be done. I'm trying to ignore that really, but we'll get there. We'll get there. This is all for paint, by the way, so I'm trying to do everything on the right sort of list I have for stuff that can go to paint, and then remember all the little jobs I could do afterwards, or need doing afterwards, or can't be done till paint, you know, all the usual confusion. Anyway, aeroplane's about to fly nice and low, so let's go and have a brew. Okay, so something else to tidy up this front end, this intercooler, to make it even remotely, you know, efficient, actually cooling the boost pressure, you know, the boost air that goes in, the boosty, the hotty. It needs fresh air to flow through, well, relatively fresh air. Now, naturally, it will exude heat, but you need to replace hot metal with a cooling aid, you know, the fins, the hot air, it needs to go somewhere. As long as the intercooler is slightly cooler than the boost pressure going through it, the air, it will cool it. But hopefully, it'll rain when we're not moving, and then once we are moving, air will go through it. Ideal world, air will come from here and go under it, but it will just dissipate round it. We need a shroud to get the air pulling out of here. We always build pressure in these minis in the front arches, so the shroud is made up of 4 parts that I've been faffing with for quite some time this afternoon, and hopefully these 4 parts will then tack in place. We'll manoeuvre them just right and weld them, then we'll sort out the edges, tiger seal it, and then put a rubber seal around the edge, and it will almost seal airtight. We want it as airtight as we possibly can around there. A good rubber edge, because it's going to be moving, obviously the engine moving, the intercooler moving, the wing moving just for slightly, and we don't want to rub through the aluminium. Rub through anything, to be honest. So we'll use a really nice thick rubber edge to go around that. So there's our parts. We're going to flip this up now, tack them in place to where we think we need to go, and then we'll drop it back down again, check it, move it, adjust it, lift it up again, re-weld it, redo it, etc. about 50 times I expect, and then I'll press record and show you what we've done. Not much different from the outside, but we have our little box we've built on the inside. No, it doesn't all look that pretty, but some of these welds I had to do upside down and kind of through the headlight to get to some of the welds, so I actually can't see where I'm welding. I do a weld, have a look through, do a weld, have a look through. So it's because I've got to weld it in and make sure it fits. To do the ideal welding, you'd have to take it off, but then I'm talking about half an hour's work to take it off, do a weld, put it back on again. It would just take hours, so that's not happening. But we need to seam sail around all of that anyway, so I'm not going to do the welding all the way around. There's no need whatsoever. So that's strong, not going anywhere, and that has made that wing a lot more rigid as well, which is kind of cool. So let's shut it up and I'll show you what it looks like shut. So it's obviously quite tricky to kind of show you how it looks in there, but you can see hopefully through the vents a little bit, and you can see up in there that basically will close the gap. Now there is a significant gap around the left and right sides, and that is because if you do a flush fit, it's fine if the wing went straight down, but it doesn't. It goes at an angle like that. So we'll do a double seal. We'll put a seal round on the intercooler and then a rubber seal round on the enclosure, and that'll seal it up really nice. So what we'll have to do is basically I'm going to put big mud flap kind of under here and hook it round, so that one, it will protect the intercooler, and two, we'll get some fresh air feed going in that direction hopefully. We'll see what the temperatures are like. Maybe we'll need to do more, run a feed from under here as well, I don't know. Hopefully it'll be okay. We'll soon find out, to be honest. But yeah, just a little bit of Techno I'll put across there. Some acrylic or some old mud flaps I'll just cut up. Got to do the same with the fresh air feed anyway. So that's cool. So we're going to let all that cool down. We'll quickly give it a wire wheel under there, maybe a little grind up on some of the welds, and then we'll seam seal that along with seam sealing the flitch panels. But that is success. We need to have a bonnet that stays up when you pop the catch. You know, you lift it up, stays up there, so it doesn't just bunk on your head, which is inconvenient and awkward. So I've got a piece of stainless rod. I think I'm going to put something over there that goes onto the bonnet. It obviously can't attach to the flip front because the flip front comes forward and then the bonnet will fall down. Not ideal again. So yeah, let's work out how to do that. Let's get the bonnet on. So there was one job as usual. I was like, I only take me an extra hour and I can shower and sleep. Well, 3 hours later, oh well, she'll do. So we've got a piece of 2mm plate at the back there, welded in, and you can sort of just see at the back over there. We've got a nice lip going round it. It's all welded all the way along, so we can actually cut out some of that lip at the back there now to tidy that up. It was kind of in the way. I did like it, but it also prevents a bit of splash coming from the wheels, which is cool. So we'll have less to splash guard just to put behind there now, just a little piece of splash guard, which is great. And then a hole in the middle with a little grommet, and then a piece of stainless rod. We've shaped that S-bend on one end to obviously go through the hole, and you just saw obviously the other end of that. And then it has a bit of shape to it for a couple of reasons. Well, one main reason is where it can sit then afterwards. We've then got a little tab. I tried to TIG weld a little tiny washer on the end of it. It does work. Not nearly as tight as I wanted, but as soon as I got puddle going, the washer was disappearing very quickly, so it does work okay, and it's a bonnet stay, isn't it? And then to put it down, I'll have to put you down, I think. So yeah, so it doesn't hold it almost at max, which is nice. You sort of have to just lean on the hinges just slightly, which I'm okay with. That's, you know, that means we get the maximum height out of the stay, and then it just clips down in there very nicely. Just clears the coolant bottle. You can't get the coolant bottle cap off with the bonnet stay down, but it's kind of irrelevant because you have to lift this up anyway to get to the bottle. And although it's on the flip front, the little catch again, you'd have to lift the bonnet up to get the flip front up and out of the way. So it clears everything, holds the bonnet up nicely. More than likely you're going to have the bonnet up lots of times to fill up the washer and check oil and fix it, then have the flip front off, you know, and doing major work. So there we go, that's it for tonight. Thanks for watching. Piggy out.